Hi, this is the demo for the OTORIO Service Graph connector. Uh, so most of this demo will focus on guided setup and most of the various components that uh, a user or a customer would configure in order to get their assets into ServiceNow from OTORIO. So to start, we have our own application menu in the left nav under Service Graph connectors. So you see here Service Graph connectors and then OTORIO, and we've got various links here. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the guided setup. The guided setup's already been performed, but I can still touch everything for that. So you're going to be presented with this landing page if it's the first time you visited. Otherwise, it'll bring you to the task with whichever you left off at. So I'm going to click review. Normally it would say get started if it was the first time. And then we have three sections here, one for handling the connection, one for the site import, which I'll have some focus on here in a bit, and then scheduling the import jobs. So the first couple of tasks in the guided setup are just table permissions. Because we support multiple connections, if a customer is setting up multiple connections, they may need to generate additional data sources and schedule jobs and so forth. And in order for our application to do that, we need that create access on that table. So all of these tasks are basically the same. They just navigate you to whichever table, and then that customer will want under application access to want can create, can update, and can delete checked here. So once those are done, you're going to configure the connection and credentials. The way this looks will depend slightly on whether the customer has upgraded their ServiceNow instance to Washington yet or not. This instance is on Washington, so it'll take us to the newer Flow Designer UI for managing connections. If not, if they're on, say, Utah or Vancouver, they would be navigated directly to the connection record in Flow Designer. So under here, I'm going to just do view details. And then you'll see that I have two connections set up here. The default connection is configured and actually pulls in data. The other one is just to help illustrate some of the artifact generation for data sources and that sort of stuff. So each connection is going to have a name, connection URL. You'll notice here that this is an IP-based URL, and this particular OTORIO instance or OTORIO Central Manager is not accessible from our ServiceNow instance, so we have to use a mid server. We have seen where certain OTORIO instances don't require a mid server, but it really just depends on whatever the customer's environment looks like, and we have support for that. So got our connection URL, mid server info here, and then our API key, which is generated within the OTORIO Central Manager. And then you just paste that API key in here. And then you'll see I've got my connection to here. That's just sort of to help show the next step of generating the integration artifacts. So I'm going to go back. Actually, I'll switch back to my tab here. So connection and credentials is complete. The next step is this generate imports. So if you have multiple connections, this is where we have sort of a little UI here to help set all of those, the scheduled import and the data source. So the OTORIO default connection, it has the little green check mark here. That means everything's already generated because it ships with the app. You can modify the job names and as well as the run as user if you would like. And then notice under the connection to, which I had labeled test connection to, you'll see that that gets prepended to the jobs that will be generated. So if I click generate here, okay, now we've got our check mark, and then I'll navigate like to our data sources, for example, which you can reach from the left nav. You'll see that we have our default connection data source here, and then we also have one for SG OTORIO asset. And that's the same for the import schedules. So basically, we're just generating a set of import schedules and a data set for that specific connection. And we're using the name of the connection to help denote that from the default ones here. So I'm returning to the guided setup now. The last step is to validate the connections. So this particular instance that I'm demoing on is on Washington, so it uses the new service graph connection framework. If the customer is on, say, Vancouver or a version earlier than Washington, they'll be directed to the data sources where they can click test load 20 records and validate the connection that way. So you can see here that our OTORIO connection has been validated and has a status code of 200. We've got our data sources and scheduled imports linked under it. If I go to the test connection too, this one doesn't have any valid like real URL or credentials, so we should see some sort of a failure on it. Yeah, so this one was a -1 because I put in this example OTORIO instance, which isn't even a real URL, so it wasn't reachable. But that's how it works with the new service graph connection framework. It's maybe a little more streamlined in terms of the error handling and quick feedback for what any issue might be. Other common errors could be 403. 403 is generally thrown if, say, the API key is invalid. This -1, I believe, would come up as well if, for example, you needed a mid server to reach the OTORIO central manager and there was no mid server or some other communication issue. But that's shown here in the status code and the messages here. So like I had said, our default connection is up and running and has a 200 and has been successfully validated. So we're good there. And that is basically everything that you need to start getting data in here. So from here, the next step is going to be to import your OTORIO sites and then map those to the ISA 95 equipment model entities in ServiceNow. If you want to use those features, this is an optional feature, but for OT and site inheritance and those sorts of use cases, that would be handled in this second section here for importing the sites. So the first step with that is just to click on the import sites task, and that's going to take you to the OTORIO site import scheduled job, which this is just a scheduled script execution, and it inserts directly into our OTORIO sitemaps table. It doesn't go through Integration Hub ETL or anything like that. So it is just a basic kind of scheduled job. And once this completes from the guided setup, you can then review the OTORIO sites that were imported. So the sitemap sort of takes the place of the NIDS, for example. Basically, the idea is that a customer will create their ISA equipment model sites as part of their CMDB implementation. And then once the site data comes in from OTORIO, if it comes in slightly different, spelling or anything like that, they can use these sitemaps to link which site they want, assets to get related to. So from here, this is one of the sitemap records. These basically mirror the fields like on the NIDS or the equipment model site where you would have some sort of inheritance. Now you can see here we've got a site type of OT. We have the OTORIO site ID here that came from OTORIO, and then we've created an ISA equipment model site using the ISA 95 default template for that. So here we have the site linked there, and then the location is linked as well. These other fields such as support group, company, so on and so forth, they could all be populated too. But by default, only the location and the equipment model site are going to be inherited by any assets that come in. So if an asset at OTORIO is linked to this site, we have it set up now so that that relationship will come over and be imported in ServiceNow. The inheritance can be configured. That's the last step on the site setup here. The site field mapping just brings you to a system property where you have various true false flags for each of those fields. So by default, location is true, equipment model entity is true. That's sort of the bare minimum that we need. If you wanted to, for example, have the support group inherited, you just switch that to the true here. And again, this should look familiar if you're familiar with the out-of-box DIDS framework. It's basically mimicking that. So, so yeah, that's configurable here, and that's basically all you need to do to get those site relationships set up. And then the last section is just to schedule the import jobs. So this is pretty straightforward. You're just going to be navigated to the scheduled data import records. And each of those you can, you'll want to activate those and set the daily runtime. So this one runs at 2 a.m., for example. And once everything's activated and set to run, you can always click execute now, of course, or you can just let it run on its natural schedule and check it the next morning or what have you. So from there, that's where normally I'm going to end up on the CMDB integrations dashboard and clicking on the total imports and seeing those past imports right there. And we can see the SG OTORIOs here, and this is run for a couple of days previously. And really from there, your data's basically in. So if we do have a guided setup link to this to review the imported data. So that's one way to get to it. And this is going to take you to the hardware table where the discovery source is SG OTORIO, or under our application menu. So if I type OTORIO here, we have two links for devices. One is for hardware, which we're seeing now, and one is for OT assets that get created if applicable. So I'll go back to the hardware screen here and just kind of show you, this is a sort of a demo development environment that we're connected to. So we don't have a ton of devices, but we've got several dozen and a few different classes of devices here. So you can see we've got a number of PLCs, got some Linux servers, network gear, so on and so forth. One last thing I would like to call out, like on the data part, is if I open one of these up, and let me see if I can find a good example. So we have created form views, and the form view name is SG OTORIO. We've created those views for every class that we map to in the CMDB. And the reason for that is we wanted to add the key value V2s to the view. Those store several fields, like impact related fields that are present in OTORIO that customers would want to see. So if I can find an example here of one that actually has it populated, maybe one of these Linux servers would have it. Maybe not. Okay, yeah, so I don't see it there. I'll find one here quick. Okay, let me get a configuration item. Okay, yeah, so you can see here grouped by the CI. There's safety impact, regulatory impact, financial impact, productivity, so on and so forth. And those are like a 1 to 5 value. So you would be able to see those on the relevant CI if they're populated in OTORIO. They'll get imported into ServiceNow. So that is basically all that there is for the OTORIO Service Graph connector. It's designed to be pretty much straightforward, and a lot of the things like the data sources and those sorts of things are mostly pre-configured. You just have to activate everything and just follow the guided setup steps, making sure that you have a valid connection, and then the site mapping if that's part of your use case, and then activating the import jobs, and it really should just run on its own for the most part. So that's about it. Thanks.